Good afternoon. I am Antonello Folco Biagini, Rector of Unitelma Sapienza. Today I am pleased to introduce the first web seminar of the Games for Change series, where we talk about the gamification and its important implication for learning and education. We would thank the Embassy of the United States in Italy and Dr. Mariangela Matarozzo and her team of virtual reality experience for the proposal and the great organization. The today web seminar entitled Gaming XR Art Digital Museum and Galleries is moderated by Gaetano Thieri, head of our virtual reality lab of Unitelma Sapienza, and includes the participation of international speakers which are experts in the field of gamification. I would thank to all of you and wish you a good job.
I am Associate Professor at University of Rome Unitelma Sapienza and Head of Virtual Reality Laboratory of Unitelma Sapienza. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce and to moderate the meeting entitled Gaming XR Art Digital Museum and Galleries. Before starting, I really want to thank the organizers, which are Virtual Reality Experience team in collaboration with the Embassy of United States of America in Italy and University of Rome Unitelma Sapienza. Before I hand over the first speaker, I would like to call and, of course, to thank Ms. Mariangela Matarozzo and her Virtual Reality Experience team for the great efforts in organizing this event. Mariangela, I want to call you and say, of course, thank you. So please.
Okay, thank you, Gaetano, and hi, everyone, and welcome. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be and to work in collaboration with you, Gaetano, with the University Unitelma, and of course with the US Embassy. So first of all, Gaetano, thanks. You collaborate with us since the first edition of a virtual reality experience. So I'm very proud of this. And I want thankful to Rector Antonello Folco Biagini for hosting and sharing our project. It's really a great honor to receive his inaugural greetings. And as Gaetano said before, I'm the artistic director of the International Festival VR Experience, entirely dedicated to explore the impact of immersive technologies in culture, arts, science, industry. And I'm also delighted to thank Beth Poisson, Minister Consular for Public Affairs, US Embassy in Italy, for the collaboration in carried out the amazing project Gaming for Change series. It's a mini cycle of 3 panels about the role of gamification in educational contemporary art and storytelling. Today is the first date, and I want to warmly thanks our brilliant speakers, Christian Paul, thank you, Christian, and Antonella Foce, thank you, Antonella. Okay, we can start. Thanks so much, everybody.
Oh, thank you again, Mariangela. Thank you. Thank you, of course, also to your team for the incredible efforts.
Okay, I want to say thank you to Marina Massaro, and because is in our team, she is the international project manager, and this project was conceived with her. So Marina is part of the audience. Thanks, Marina, for working with us, with the team. Thank you so much. Go on.
Okay. So before starting now, I'm honored to call Beth Poisson, the Minister Consular of Public Affairs, member of the Syrian Foreign Service, U.S. Department of State. So Ms. Beth Poisson, thank you for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Professor Thieri. It's a great honor to be with all of you today. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun too. So it's a pleasure to join you in this first event in the Games for Change series. You know, in our digital age, gaming culture continues to develop and to grow by connecting people of different backgrounds and beliefs, by broadening perspectives, and by building new communities. Gaming is an excellent platform for broadening and harnessing the power of technology for educational and cultural purposes. It's a driver of economic and social progress. But for the embassy, it's also very important because it's contributing to the development and deepening of our ties, the ties between the Italian people and the American people, and our institutional linkages. So talking about institutional linkages, this program was made possible thanks to the cooperation and collaboration of a few key partners, including the University of Rome, Unitelma Sapienza, the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, Roma Tre University, the European Institute of Design, and Vigamus, the Video Game Museum of Rome. So as others have said, special thanks to Ms. Matarozza, Director of the Virtual Reality Experience, and to Professor Biagini of the University of Rome, Unitelma Sapienza. This program series on the uses of gamification in culture, in the arts, for storytelling, for education, is a part of the U.S. Embassy Public Diplomacy Initiative, especially focused on engaging Italian youth in technology, innovation, and digital themes. Now I would like to extend a very warm welcome to today's guest speaker, Dr. Christiane Paul. Dr. Paul, as you know, is the Director and Chief Curator of the Sheila C. Johnson Design Center, Parsons School of Design, and Adjunct Curator of New Media Arts, Whitney Museum of American Arts, both located in the fabulous and wonderful New York City. Welcome, Dr. Paul. And finally, I want to just thank all the participants today, and I hope that you'll enjoy the program and continue with the series. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker of today, Professor Christine Paul, which is connected from New York City. She will share a presentation entitled Games and Gamification in Contemporary Art. Before calling our guest speakers, I would just to say to all the people connected in this room that if you have any question, please feel free to write your question in the chat. Also in Italian is okay, in Italian, and so that our speaker can read and in case answers as soon as possible. So thank you very much to all of you. Christine Paul, I'm so glad to have you here with us.
Thanks so much for the great introductions, Beth and Gaetano, and thanks for inviting me and for attending. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a second. Okay. Once again, thank you very much. We're talking about games and gamification in contemporary art. And gamification, of course, has really received more and more attention in recent years, particularly with the rise of new technologies. And I think when we want to talk about gamification per se, which I think is what Antonella will be addressing in a little bit more detail, I believe we also need to take a look at the role that games have played in art history and that they have played within a digital context in museums within the past decade plus. So I want to start by giving a little bit of an overview of the art historical connections related to games. Of course, we have seen for centuries representations of games in artworks. And then with the surrealists and situationists and with Dada and Fluxus in particular, games received more attention as a kind of rule-based practice that operated on chance principles. So we have famous works such as Exquisite, Cadaver. You see an example here by Man Ray, André Breton, Yves Tanguy, and Max Maurice on the left. We have had the famous, infamous Duchamp playing chess with Yves Babbitt in a gallery, and many students and artists have actually restaged this particular game with a reversal of roles, the fully dressed female with the nude male. And then in Fluxus, you also see many examples such as George Masunia's Fluxus box that would engage with play and gaming in artistic practice. Since digital technologies have been on the rise, game art established itself as a real genre within art. And I want to make a basic distinction here between games that can be considered art or game art created by artists that aesthetically and critically engage with games. And those have been fairly contested territories. Of course, you can consider many games art per se. The Museum of Modern Art has started collecting some of the classics, and what I will show in the following will also include some games that I think can easily qualify as art. Then again, we have seen practice by artists that has been focused on games and has played with games. And very often these artists question rule-based structures, they break the games, they hack the games, highlighting aesthetic characteristics or using them as engines for the creation of abstract art. So within artistic practice, we're looking at several categories, and I will not be able to go into all of them, but artists have created original games, coding them from scratch. They have created mods, patches, and hacks within game engines or existing games. They have created installations and sculptures that involve games. We have also seen a lot of interventions in massive multiplayer online role-playing games where artists have staged performances. And then the area of machinima, game-based movies, has also gained a lot of traction over the years. And just to show you some examples, Natalie Bookchin's MetaPet, created in 2002, was a great example that addressed not only genetic modifications, but also the workplace. And Robert Nideffer, in his WTF, basically created a game referring to WoW, World of Warcraft, but really engineering it so that what you encounter are theorists and philosophers such as Marx and others, with a lot of embedded references to existing game art. More recently, with virtual reality, we also have seen a lot of games moving into that platform. A great example is David O'Reilly's Everything, a game in which you can basically be and accumulate everything. And created as a game, this work has received a lot of attention within an art context. Another great example of that category, also available on Steam in VR, is Tracy Fullerton's Walden, a game which is based on Thoreau's work and basically takes you through the environment of Walden. As you can guess, in these two games, they do not function on the basis of traditional competitive rules, but really try to propose alternative play. We have seen over the past 2 decades an enormous amount of mods and patches and hacks, and I'm just mentioning a couple of examples. Jody, the Dutch duo, have created a lot of game-based works in which they used game engines and games such as Castle Wolfenstein for generating graphic structures. So you see here an image of SOD, one of their famous works. And another example would be Mary Flanagan's Domestic, in which she used the Unreal Engine. And this game ultimately is a personal story referring to a childhood incident when her father accidentally set the house on fire. So you are moving through this burning house and trying to shoot coping mechanism at the walls. So it has a lot of psychological subtext. And a lot of these game art pieces have been exhibited as sculptures. Cory Archangel's Super Mario Clouds from 2002-2003 is one of the very famous pieces in which he hacked the Nintendo cartridges to remove everything but the clouds that you see as this piece of pop art in the gallery with the exposed gaming mechanisms. And what you're looking at here is an installation shot of the exhibition Feedback at the Laboral Art Center in Gijón that I co-curated with Jemima Relly and Charlie Gear. And in the foreground are 3 games. From the left, Robert Rauschenberg's Open Score that was part of experiments in art and technology. Then framed in the middle, Mary Flanagan's Giant Joystick, a joystick sculpture that really invites collaborative gameplay, and Ido Stern's Fort Paladin, America's Army, in which he creates a sculpture that has a recruiting game by the US Army embedded in it and engages with that part of practice. So here a couple more close-ups of those works so you get a better impression. What we have seen over the development of game art is a few representational changes. The early games obviously were in 2D, that practice moved into 3D. We have been looking at the deconstruction of representational architectures, as in the example of Jody, really using the game engine for generating abstract structures. We have seen experiments with relationships between framing and perspective. And over time, games have also moved from an indexical recording, more video-based, to real-time algorithmically and on-the-fly generated image spaces. And one of the big topics that artists have been exploring, of course, are user control and agency in games. In the 90s and early 2000s, we saw an enormous amount of game-focused exhibitions. These are just selected exhibitions during this time frame. And I want to highlight this because I thought it was really significant within the development of digital art. Game art was at the forefront of bringing digital art into a museum and gallery context. So early on, you saw these exhibitions at very established galleries. I think this first wave of game art pushing into the art context by now has turned into something else and more of a focus on gamification. Just to name 3 examples, the Laboral Art Center in Gijón in Asturias in Spain actually staged 3 exhibitions over the course of 2 years. Game World in 2007, and as you can see, the whole architecture of the exhibition space is really geared towards these game worlds, then followed by Playware, the Game World expansion pack, and finally Homo Ludens, curated by Eric Berger, Daphne Dragona, and Laura Bejora. So these were really landmark exhibitions engaging with the critical practice of games within an art context. And segueing into Antonella's presentation, I want to talk a little bit about the gamification of the museum experience that has really been on the rise recently. Gamification understood as the applying of key elements of gameplay, for example, point scoring or competition or rules, to areas of activity to encourage engagement with a brand, product, or service. So what we are facing here are certain kinds of challenges. within gamification, it's really important to enhance the engagement with and education about art without distracting from the art itself. You know, we want to augment visitor experiences without competing with artwork. And games and gamification are also, or at least can be, a very helpful way to learn about audience demographics and their engagement. And I want to close with just a few examples. The Whitney Museum in 2010 commissioned a game by the artist duo Übermorgen called Klickistan. And Klickistan was basically a game that was used for fundraising for the Whitney Museum. So what you see here is a blurring of gamification for museum infrastructure, but created by artists. Yeah. What was very interesting to us was that Klickistan was not super successful at raising a lot of money, which is what nobody expected, but it really brought a new audience to the Whitney Museum and got more people engaged. So within this game, you would be navigating through different scenarios. Here you have one level of the game that engaged with little shopping carts. It was relatively easy to play. And in this case, an example of an artwork that was used for fundraising, and I think was a little ahead of its time in terms of that engagement. Another example I want to mention on that level is La Turbo Avedon's Manchester Virtual Factory. So La Turbo was commissioned to create a virtual space for the Manchester factory, which is still in the process of being created and launched. And La Turbo, who has been living as an avatar mostly for the past decade, created a very elaborate game that once again functioned as an introduction to a new museum space, and at the same time also was a work of game art. And I also want to briefly at least mention augmented reality, since we are talking about XR here, as a way of engaging visitors. This example is from MUMOC in Vienna, and it's not necessarily a game, but shows you how augmented reality can be used for sharing information or engaging visitors with the experience of exhibitions, with the programming. And of course, there is a lot of potential in these types of technologies in particular to bring education to membership. And once again, we have to be very careful about not competing with the artwork, but really enhancing artwork and the museum experience through gamification. And I think I'll end it here and stop sharing. Thank you so much.
Okay, here we are. Thank you, Prof, for Professor Christine Paul, for your very interesting presentation. We have some comments in chat that you can easily read. About the question, we will have all the questions at the end of the presentation of our second speakers, Antonella Poce, Professoressa Antonella Poce. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Professoressa Antonella Poce, our second speaker of today, which will share with us a presentation entitled Cross-Sectional Skills Development in Virtual Reality Heritage Environments. Just a few words about the Professoressa Poce. Antonella Poce is a full professor in experimental pedagogy at the Department of Education and Humanities, University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, where she directs Intellect, a center of research into museum educational well-being and teaching technology, and she's the head of a one-year postgraduate course, Heritage Education and Digital Technology. She's also a scientific director of two postgraduate courses, Annual Museum Education and Biennial Advanced Study in Museum Education at University of Roma 3. She also coordinates national units within European project framework, and she has been chairing international academic committee dealing with distance learning. She's finally is an author of different publications of national and international relevance of topic of innovation, assessment, and the use of technology in teaching and learning in the context of heritage fruition. Also, in this case, I want to ask to all the people here to write any question in the chat, and at the end of the presentation, we will try to answer your question. So, Professoressa Antonella Poce, I'm very glad to have you here with us.
Thank you for your introduction. I would like you to share my presentation because as we tried, there are some problems with sharing my screen. I will go very rapidly in order to present one of the experiences that we carried out within our group. Actually, this work that I'm going to introduce you to present to you is a work that was developed within Roma Tre University, where I used to chair the Center for Museum Studies. At the moment, as Gaetano told you, I am chairing a new center for research, the Intellect Center, based at the Department of Education and Humanities, University of Modena and Reggio Emilia. The center that I chair is a center, as it was already mentioned, that was created within the department in order to develop cross-sectional skills in cultural heritage users, particularly in displaced groups, to support, of course, cultural mediation channels and tools. Different experts from different institutions are part of our scientific council. So we have experts from Canada to US, the National Gallery of Art based in Washington, the MoMA Museum, UK, Loughborough University, University, the Catholic Institute based in Paris, lots of colleagues from UCL, University College of London, different areas that are represented in our center and that contribute to the development of our center. We have in our scientific council, I would like to mention that we also have artists in our council board for the Intellect Center, Marica Moro and Tito Rossini, Italian contemporary artists. So I think that could be interesting for Christian Paul too. Anyway, I'll go very briefly through my presentation. I'm sorry you are not seeing the images. We have been working on the development of a specific hub that wanted to underline, to develop certain specific skills, in particular critical thinking skills in the users. After the COVID-19 pandemic, we understood, all of us, all over the world, we understood that we had to adapt rapidly to a revolutionary situation where the need to experience art, to experience heritage, was to be different and mediated by technology. So as educators, as experts in education, we had to face such an emergency, and we had to make a critical use of technology. That is why we wanted to work especially on this link, the link related to the possibility to develop critical thinking that is pivotal for human and social progress in terms of innovation, economic and knowledge growth. Many different sources underline this aspect. And the idea of using art and heritage to enhance such skills, supported by technology, taking into consideration the situation where we are in. Different strategies. We base our new application, the application that we, so please go on. If you can go on. We base this here, if you stop there, the following one, we base our application studying different kind of strategies. First of all, reflective questioning, visual thinking, and digital storytelling. The next one, please. In order to work on the development, I was telling you, of a specific application. This application was created taking into starting from a first consideration. A first consideration that was a result of a European project that we were part of, the EMI project, the European Museums Exhibiting Europe project, where we worked on the idea that each object tells us a story. It tells us a story that through different kind of items. It tells us a story related to the place where it was created, the owners that owned it, the trip that this object made from its creation to the place where it is exhibited. So its story can really create a relation with the user, with any visitor that enters that place and comes into relation with the object. We created, if you can go on to the Etruria presentation, that is the application that we created, starting from the Etruscan collection of the museum, the Etruscan Museum in Rome, Villa Giulia. We started from there. We started from that collection, and we developed a research hypothesis. The research hypothesis was to achieve a high degree of involvement and educational effectiveness in terms of critical thinking development, it is necessary to build virtual environments that place the user in an active condition with respect to the interaction with the cultural object itself. So starting from the creative narration of museum objects, the general aim of the study was to unfold the preservation and the possibility to invent a collective memory, a shared memory, which is essential part of the cultural canon we are part of, and which is able to support critical thinking development in actual and potential users. We developed certain research questions, but the intent today was to let you have an idea of the application that as a group we developed. I must tell you that the group was made of experts in education, experts in literature, experts in computer science, as Dr. Carlo De Medio is, and that you had the opportunity to listen from him at the very beginning of this meeting. Alessio Caccamo, a designer, Maria Rosaria Re, expert in education and literature, Mara Valente, expert in history of art and education, Francesca Menduni, expert in psychology. So the team that developed the application was very heterogeneous and made of different kind of profiles. This was fundamental, essential to create this application, where through Opie and Crateri, jewels, and the well-known sarcophagus of the spouses, ad hoc storytellings, creative history, creative stories were created, analyzed in their history and contents in terms of decorations and stories, and proposed to different groups of public. The application allows us to have identification of the users through a very brief questionnaire, but this questionnaire is not a usual one. I mean, we try to understand how to identify the learning needs of the users in terms of relation with the object. I don't know if you can see the first images. This is the first welcoming of the user. If you go to the next one, you enter this virtual museum, and clicking on the coin, there's the possibility to meet the first object, the open book in Booker. That object tells you a story, and I would like to stop a little bit here. The story is told by the object itself, and actually by one of the characters that are represented on the object, that is Jason. And Jason tells his story and his personal relation with Medea. This story really involves and entertains the users through the story, through that creative story. The user has also the possibility to go deeper and to learn more about the object, about the Etruscan people, about the uses and the habits in the lives of women, because we created different paths, and this object, this Olpe in Bucaro, is inserted in a path devoted to the interpretation and the uses that women had in that time. This is one of the developments related to the Vello d'Oro. So to know more about what is told within the story, you can have this kind of developments. If we go on, we also developed an evaluation session, not just through, as you can see, emoticons choice, but also through open-ended questions. The open-ended questions were useful to develop critical thinking skills assessment. Actually, we have been working on an assessment procedure related to critical thinking skills. Here you have the objects of the collection that are related to women and women uses during the Etruscan time. So each object tells a story. Each story is connected to a series of developments. But if we go on to the end of the presentation, just to tell you that we had two kind of pilot experiences. One was related to the experience of a small group, 20 participants, experts in the field of art history or archaeology, and then we had another pilot activity with 124 participants, instead coming from the education area, not experts in archaeology or art history. The results, if you go on towards the end, please go on. I'll go to the very end. I'm not going to describe graphics and data, but I wanted to reach the very end where we have the conclusion exactly here. We, through different analysis and through different assessment tools, we reached three main conclusions. First of all, that we managed in designing a learning path that was aimed to combine digital storytelling with reflective question methodologies in order to enhance critical thinking skills in the users. The other point is that we realized that through the results that we collected, and that of course should be enlarged and extended to larger audiences, that a general appreciation for the virtual exhibition that was strongly correlated with the appreciation of the object's narratives, in line with our pedagogical hypothesis. This means that also certain objects that are not so popular could be supported, could be made known through narration, through creative stories that succeed in involving the public. Of course, these results are preliminary in nature, but they provide initial methodological and pedagogical insights regarding the design of virtual reality museum exhibition for educational purposes. So this means that we need to work more, but there's something there. So with this, I end my presentation. I thank you so much for being there. I'm available for more information if you are interested. Of course, my email is at your disposal. I anyway would like to thank the other members of the group that made this application possible. Again, Maria Rosaria Re, Mara Valente, Francesca Menduni, Carlo De Medio, Alessio Caccamo. Thank you so much for being part of the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Professoressa Pocia. It was a great presentation, very, very stimulating. Maybe I have a question for you after, but let's start with the first speaker, with Christine. I would remind it to all the people here, if you have any question, we have 15 minutes free. So if you have any question, please feel free to write it in English or Italian in the chat. Christine, maybe I have a general question for you. Your presentation was impressive, and my question is very general. Considering the pandemic that we are living right now, in your opinion, by using new technologies, for example, immersive virtual reality with a headset, or I don't know, augmented reality also with a headset, can we bring the cultural and the art outside the museum, inside the house of the people, and having more or less the same results? So what do you think about it? Is it possible? Is it something that can help us to enter virtually in a museum?
Thanks. That is a very interesting question. And I also want to broaden the context. The pandemic has really created a situation where art experiences at large have moved online. You know, all of the museums are doing their programming online, talks, etc., virtual exhibitions. And to those of us who have been working in this field for a few decades, it almost felt like a flashback to the 90s. So one answer to your question is, we have seen virtual museum experiences and virtual exhibition experiences for 30 years. But it's only now that they gained more traction again. So this also tells you something. I would say that absolutely the experience of physical space cannot be translated into virtual space. The virtual space and the type of work that Antonella has shown, for example, constitutes its own world and experience. And I'm not saying that as a criticism, but I think it's a false start to try to do a one-on-one translation. There are physical experiences, there are virtual experiences, and they are distinctly different. My hope is that in the world after the pandemic, more emphasis will be placed on bringing virtual experiences of art to a larger public. We also have to consider that there are access issues, as we have seen across the board right now. Not very many people have a headset. You know, with all of the programs I participated in, even if they were set up for VR, most of the people did not have the equipment at home to experience them that way. So Mozilla Hubs, for example, is a great way of combining the two. You can have the browser-based experience and the experience within the headset. And another thing I want to mention here, and Antonella beautifully has made that clear, is that a virtual exhibition experience offers more opportunities to dive into, let's say, educational aspects and make you learn about objects. If you are translating something physical into virtual space, we also have to make a major distinction between, once again, translating objects into the virtual or experiencing digital art that from the start has been created as a virtual experience. And those boundaries have become very blurry right now. So we could talk about this for hours. This is just a, basic response to some of the questions you've raised.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sorry, may I have a question for Christian? I have a question for you, Christian. It's related to your presentation that it was really inspiring, and I'd like to know if you could tell us what is, according to you, the role of narration in the conception of the game-based work of art in general, and in the specific in the works that you mentioned in your presentation?
Yeah, that also is a really interesting question. Thanks for bringing it up. I would say that radically varies, as you have seen some of the examples I showed, for example, the hacks and modifications of game engines. They were really geared towards creating abstract visual art. But then there were many other examples that are really more about storytelling. So Walden, again, is also very much about Henry David Thoreau's work, about Walden, the book about the experience. So it is ultimately a form of visual storytelling. Mary Flanagan's work, Domestic, ultimately also is really about words, coping mechanisms, telling of a childhood experience, etc. So I think you might say that there always is an aspect of digital storytelling embedded in every game, but some of them focus more really on the exploration of storytelling per se. And I think there's great potential there.
Okay, thank you. Let's see some comments. We have different comments that you can read in the chat. In the meanwhile, I have a question for Professor Antonella Poce, or does someone have a question for Christine? Okay. In the meanwhile, I have a question for Professoressa Poce. Professoressa, I think that your presentation is very interesting, and the study that you are doing are necessary in somehow. My question is this: are you using a two-dimensional presentation of the virtual museum, or are you also including a virtual reality experience? For example, by using an headset, the participant can stay inside. This is a question because that based on the sense of presence that the people can experience when wearing a head-mounted display, that allows people to respond to the virtual stimuli as if they are real. So we're not hearing you. Your mic is off.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry. This is a very relevant question because, of course, as you might have understood, hopefully, from what you have seen from my presentation, we have been working on the development of such an application, and we are at the very beginning of it, actually. One of the aims of the possibility to follow up this kind of study is exactly to develop this kind of reality where you are completely immersed in the situation, and to see also the differences in the results of the experience. As you might have understood, our aims were focused on developing a system where the user could develop cross-sectional skills, in particular critical thinking skills. But the dimension and the level of the involvement was to be carried as one of the primary aims and objectives and purposes of the realization of such a product. So yes, of course, we're going to develop this kind of situation.
Thank you for your answer. We have a question in the chat from Ilenia Frascone, which asks, also interesting, I think that pandemic is giving us the opportunity to improve the way we use new technology for education. At the moment, what is the target that mostly attract this type of communication? Do adults feel involved in this new reality? Christine, your mic is off.
Christian, yeah.
Okay, thank you. From my experience, I think the kind of move online of the art world has really brought a new audience to digital technologies per se, and many more adults and older museum audiences have engaged in a way they wouldn't have before, where they would not have flocked to these technologies. So I think that is definitely something that has changed. And I think for education departments within museums, it also has been a learning curve, really experimenting with what works and what doesn't work in which format, you know, from the Twitter tours to the Instagram live talks and virtual experiences. I would say in general, people have been very engaged with getting information about exhibitions that were trapped in museum spaces online through video, through virtual experiences. I also want to very quickly respond to another question. Somebody asked if there are any examples combining cultural heritage, museum and games with interactive sounds or video mapping installations. So just a few quick notes on that. I don't think I have the perfect example, but there have been early works, for example, by Michael Neymark, Be Here Now, which was an interactive work and installation, immersive installation in a rotunda that dealt with cultural heritage sites that you could explore within this environment. Obviously, there are also many interactive sound walks. That is also part of practice that has gained traction in recent years. And I would also mention Christopher Ditko's video mapping works. These are projections on monuments within New York City and other parts of the world, where he critically engages with social structures and the heritage of monuments. So while these are artworks, they definitely also have an educational aspect.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much. There are other comments in the chat and also other questions. Maybe we have just 1 minute to answer.
Yeah, there's this question, which is very interesting. I think Christian can give us a suggestion related to do you think it is from Deb? It's from Deborah Howes, I think. Is it possible that artists could influence the development of gaming development, of games development, in a way that we could enrich and have you know, a culturally more substantial and influential way of developing this area in creative industry, actually?
I would say absolutely, and this has been going on for a long time already. First of all, I think artists cannot compete with gaming studios which have hundreds of millions and hundreds of employees to spend on a single game. So that would be a little too much of an expectation. But I think there have been a lot of games that really have brought attention to the potential of video games. The fact that Games for Change exists, I think, is part of that. Because Games for Change, that was definitely not the main goal of the video game industry from the start. And I think artists and artworks have really contributed to that development. How to harness the potential of games for social good, for educating, you know, or for really creating new paradigms. Like David O'Reilly's Everything, which I showed, it really breaks the rules of games traditionally, but has been enormously successful and won a lot of awards within the industry. So I think we cannot expect artists to be complete game changers here competing with an industry, but at the same time, they from the start, I believe, have had enormous influence. Mary Flanagan is also one of the artists who received early in her career a lot of attention for doing one of the first girl games ever. Yeah. So creating, instead of violent shooters, you know, games for young women. And we all know about Gamergate and the associated discussions. So artists have played a lot of roles as being correctives within that context.
That's absolutely vital. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Christine, for being with us. Thank you, of course, Antonella, to you for sharing the presentation. It was very, very interesting. Thank you all the people who wrote in the chat and for your participation. It has been a very good first talk about the Games of Change series. looking forward to the next one, which will held on the 16th April, Friday, 16th April. So thank you to all of you.
Do not miss all the events in the series. There will be very interesting speakers, and we are going to have very interesting talks, and it's as Christian mentioned, it's very important that we keep on working on this kind of possibilities, opportunities to develop and to make art and heritage a place for everyone.
Yes. Maybe the Professor Paul need to go. Is it right, Professor Christine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for being with us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being with us, Christian.
Thanks so much, everyone. See you.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Professoressa Poce, maybe there are many questions. I don't know, maybe they are for you. Luca D'Amelio asked, hello, I have a question. Where and on what circumstances do you think gaming will not work as a form of education? Hope my question will be answered.
That's a good question. We learn, and we start learning, and we keep on learning through games and through gaming. Also, telling a story is a sort of game. When you in English, especially when you use the word play, it has different kind of meanings, also related to acting. So again, in my view, that there is not a place or a situation, a circumstance, as you were saying, Luca, where gaming would not work as a form of education. What we should be careful about is related to, first of all, the research design behind the gaming proposal, and also the cultural content that we develop and that we hand out through our gaming proposal. Again, we shouldn't think that there are strategies or ways to be neglected. If there's a good research design behind it, if there's a pedagogical aim, a well thought anyway, pedagogical aim, and if there's the possibility to monitor results, to adapt our proposal to what are the pedagogical aims at the basis. And so what I was telling you at the very beginning related to the need to have heterogeneous teams working on the development of certain products.
I completely agree with you, Professoressa Poce. Just a comment to extend what your answer about the gamification, the use of gaming for learning. With Virtual Reality Lab in Unitelma Sapienza, before the pandemic started, we brought at school, elementary school, the first school, a video game that we developed for Oculus Go, the first kind of Oculus headset standalone, while a child could play inside a virtual environment that was full of stimuli concerning economics and financial literacy. And we observed that, first of all, children play with very enthusiastic when played. In the meanwhile, we collected data, and we found, for example, something that play game for teaching something very difficult to teach in different way. For example, economical or financial literacy terms, terminology, etc. It's very easy for a child to play, learning by doing virtual reality and learn. So maybe this kind of world can be very promising for future pedagogy and educational.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And the most important thing I was saying, also mentioning before, is that we can have assessment and evaluation procedures that enable us to understand to which point and at which level we collect results directly linked to the objectives that we had in the conception of our proposals.
Okay. So maybe it's time to close. So I want to say thank again for the organization. Mariangela Matrozzo, thank you for your team. Professoressa Poce, thank you for your time and for sharing with us
Thanks to
your
you,
presentation.
to all of you, to all the participants, all the students that were there. A lot of them, I've seen that we had a large audience. And I also want to thank everyone that contributed in the chat, because there are many different suggestions that we all can take into consideration and enlarge our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and see you the next appointment on the 16th April for speaking about Game for Change. So thank you again. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Goodbye.